Good morning to you, Norman.
Good morning.
Great to see you. I'm filled with admiration for your hat painting syndrome. It's looking great.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. Thanks a lot.
Great. Well, I'm super looking forward to this conversation. I know a lot of other folks are as well. Just to repeat something Lucy just said there, which is important. First of all, let us know where you're calling in from. And also, as Norman speaks, and he has a lot of images to show, a really rich visual presentation to share with us, just go ahead and put the questions in the chat box and we'll get back to them at the end, and hopefully we'll have some good time for our conversation. So Norman, I'm going to go ahead and suggest that we just kick off with the PowerPoint so that we can get into it.
Sure.
So if you want to fire it up.
Absolutely.
But I don't think we've said you're calling from Chicago, which will become abundantly clear over the course of the conversation. But hello, Chicago.
Hello, Chicago. So first off, oh God.
Oh, you got to go to the first slide first.
Yeah, sorry guys. I'm giving it away.
Doing it all backwards.
Oh God, it's a lot.
It's okay to have the preview. We've got people calling in from England and Spain and Scotland.
What's happening?
And even Paul Sacarides from Haystack Mountain School in Maine. So
is that Paul?
All over, yeah. It's Paul there. Okay, here we go.
Okay, so thank you guys all for zooming in. Thank you so much, Lucy and Glenn Friedman. Thank you so much for this platform to discuss my work and hear from such a great design audience. I'm Norman Teague from Chi-Town, Southside. And I'm here to tell you a little bit about my work, the purpose of my work, be it from a built environment or from a human standpoint. And I'm a designer who really pushes the boundaries of how to include contemporary community of color. And I'm going to start at home. And these two boys here are mine. That's Elijah Teague and Noah Teague. They are my heart. They long to be designers and architects. And I am trying to clear a field for them to do that. And I'd like to introduce you to a team of designers here in Chicago. And they are an essential part of Norman Teague Design Studios. And they asked that I introduce them this way, so here we go. This is a project we worked on in Chicago. It's called the Silver Room. That's Ibere in the middle, Nick Baker, the builder, and Daniel Overby, another designer. Future Firm is the architecture firm that we work with, and Eric Williams is the owner of the Silver Room, which for us here in Chicago is kind of like a cultural center. Max Davis is a phenomenal architect and fabricator who did a lot of the digital fabrication work. All right, so I'm gonna get out of that. the beauty of having young people work with you is the really incredible gifts that come along with it. So for a group of young people to work on a space like this, I wanted to show you the end of that space. All of this work was designed and built and fabricated by a group of young African-American designers and builders here in Chicago. And working with an owner who really supports this kind of work, as well as lots of really important projects across the city of Chicago. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about my work. This piece is where I did a little bit of research to really think about dependability, to think about how things work together, to think about materials. So a lot of this was driven from stories, people, particularly from gay communities, and how they trusted and depended on this other family that might find out that they're coming out of the closet prior to them coming out to their biological families. And so that dependability led me to make pieces like this. This is dependency 1, 2, and 3. And I'm talking fast because I got about 20 minutes. So this piece is a collaboration between me and Agnieszka Kulan. She runs a company called Creatia, and she is a fashion designer, a videographer, installation artist, a mother, and a phenomenal friend. And this is Normaga. That was a material-driven project that we played in, thinking about bikers, lightweight material, and how to get through that. These are just some of the ending photos here in Chicago. I'd like to talk a little bit about Black House Studios, a solo project that was curated by Fo Wilson, and a big thanks to Eileen Rhodes and Cliff for giving me the opportunity to do this. And so this was, the name was kind of obvious. The balloons were driven by moments in Chicago. There was a lot of death going on. There was a lot of black on black crime. There was police crime. And this was sort of homage to those that we had lost. I really wanted to float this with helium, but this felt adequate for the situation. And this was all put together by, again, a group of young men here in Chicago. This is the inside, a few other pieces that I'll talk a little bit further about, but the wall in the background is called the Assemblage Armoire, and it really thinks about the history and design that doesn't include me, and this was my chance to take a page out of the history book and incorporate my own personal work alongside famous people like, you know, the Eames, well-known sort of iconic names within the design field. This is a self-portrait. It's a bookcase, but it stems from, you know, the stem itself kind of represents colonialism, which is part of a past. The bookcases kind of represented academia, which was where I was at when this was made. But it's sort of born out of this wheel that was something that I admired and sort of had a desire for when at a younger age, and that was fancy cars with dope rims that, you know, you see rolling down the street. Like, these were things that inspired a young Black man. And so this is some of the inner shots. This is called the Zigzag Bookcase, and I was driven to think further about this particular African sort of zigzag symbol and what it represents to perform the unusual. And so coming across the pieces, which were found pieces in a neighborhood that I really adored, Brownsville, where the show was, and the bookcase felt good and made sense. And so I moved forward with this. This is Hutch, another play on zigzag and materiality. It's made from Hutch with leather sort of attachments at the edge. The pieces above are found materials that are reappropriated to become objects that would then be cast and become ceramic pieces. This one you all might be familiar with, but this was also shown in the Blanc show. And the walnut piece is sort of a evolution of what we've seen from the Send Me chair in black. So really thinking about how people sat on it and giving them a place to put their feet. But also in this image, I really wanted to think about how to show off the process of how this was made, the templates that helped it to get to where it is. I also went through quite a bit of time making this in a class at the School of the Art Institute, which later took me to Milan. But these are just some of the earlier sketches and ideations that motivated the piece to get to where it ended up at. This is part of the production. The legs were digitally fabricated to get the shape, and then the sort of tubular moments came from routing, a hand router, or not a hand router, but a table router, and then the final finishes in black lacquer. This was the time in Milan, just sort of gathering research and thinking about how people would take to Send Me. And so this is just some of the users. I think the guy on the top right was more of a studier, and he was trying to think of how to balance it out. And then this is the critique that I went through when I returned back to Chicago at the School of the Art Institute. And some people still don't know. I sometimes feel like there should be a video tutorial that goes along with this piece. Just to educate the users just a little bit, but it's actually a fun chair. Like any relationship, once you get to know it, it feels really good. So Send Me Stool went on to take a Best in Show with Metropolis magazine shortly after that Milan show, and was recently acquired by the Art Institute of Chicago for their architecture and design collection.
Norman, can I just cut in there for 1 second?
Absolutely.
And in fact, we had Zoe Ryan on the show.
Hey, Zoe, thank you.
Ago, and we talked about the piece then with her and how it fits into the collection at the Art Institute, which was great to hear about. I just wanted to ask you a general question about the work, which is about the destabilization of functionality. So one thing that obviously people will have noticed is that the self-portrait bookcase, because it rolls, or at least the image, and then the zigzag bookshelf has this kind of tilting quality that obviously is unconventional with respect to how people normally arrange their books. And then as you said, the Send Me, it presents a kind of challenge or puzzle to the uninitiated sitter, like how are you going to deal with me as an author? And I wonder if you could just talk about that move that you're making characteristically in the work.
I think it's and I'm going to try and answer it quick, but I think it's piquing a curiosity for me is important. I think we have, and I think I was kind of pushed by the Eames at one time where they were studying different ways of allowing people to sit, or do we have to sit the same way for all this time? So for Send Me, it was really about like speculating on chilling, like a relaxed, because I think that sometimes design can be very corporate. It can be stiff.
Cool.
Hence the music, hence the movement. But Send Me, when it hit me, and I had it in my studio, and after doing several prototypes, I tapped this stool, and it moved, and it kept moving, and I was just like, well, do I make it sit one way, or do I make it sit that way? And I had a really great talk with Helen Maria Nugent and Jim Tremere, and they um, they sort of swayed me to be like, it's okay. You know, there was a lot of back and forth, literally back and forth, that I was considering, because those legs were, if you can look back, you know, those legs, you know, they were angled at one time so that it would be situated. So there was a lot of convincing for me to see it move, but that was the clincher to have that movement. But I really enjoyed the hesitation that people had to approach the send me stool, mainly because there was a sense of comfort that came along with once they actually sat in it. And so I think that level of discovery and sort of trust was really key to that. And I think mainly it's really just like a lot of it's been done already. So how do we really challenge what furniture is? Hence in the Hutch with the zigzag top, it's like not everything's going to sit on that top, but it really, I'm flattered to see it. I'm also flattered to touch it. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So apprenticeships are a key part of my belief system, I think, and a lot of that is no longer with us. If I had it my way, honestly, I think everything that called itself a business would be forced to take in some sort of internship at summertime, because not every kid is, wanting to go to summer camp. They want to work. And so I think it's a great way that we can start to really highlight the beauty of design while training people to at least take a look at the field. A large percentage of Black men in Chicago are jobless, but these are the exact same demographic that are working in my studio. And so it's really important to me to show off the thoughts of creating jobs. I see a number of disciplines within the design field that this brother could be a researcher. This brother could honestly be a designer, a prototyper, a woodworker. It's just those things are not as accessible as a liquor store. And so I feel like design can make changes to that. And thinking, I really enjoyed the beauty of the Herman Miller Factory, the organization of the Herman Miller Factory. And of course, all the amazing items that come out of the Herman Miller Factory were part of my design history classes. And so visiting there, I wanted to take more people with me just to get a look at the possibilities within this beautiful thing up in Michigan. It's, a couple hours away. And so we visited, and it was really great. Thank you, Herman Miller, for having us. Thank you, Gretchen. I don't know if she's out there, but that was a key moment in really allowing the vision and exposure to really think about the work that goes behind design and how to put more of it into the world. And so this is just some of my homies hanging out. A lot of my shop is pushing the boundaries of making things that come from a sheet of paper, but a lot of it is really thinking about how to employ people, how to interest people in design by really incorporating them into the process, not so much just the labor part of it, but also the thinking that goes into it on the front end. And so a lot of that brainstorming I try and do with my guys because they can help me figure that out. But there's also this huge level of pride that comes along with that I really can't step away from because the work that we do usually goes out into the public in some form or fashion, and that's when the sort of pride comes in. So this is DNA STL in St. Louis. We built a majority of these things in Chicago, took a 5-hour trip to St. Louis, and installed this inside of the store. I want to talk a little bit about Black House Studios and my amazing partner, Fo Wilson, who has been instrumental in a lot of the work that's been getting done here in Chicago under Black House Studios. I love her like a sister. Meeting someone in Chicago, we met at Volume Gallery through a friend, and the click was immediate. You know, it was, we got to work together. And that was, I think, 6 years ago, maybe more. So we've traveled the globe together. We've gone to Nigeria. And Black House Studios is a Chicago-based socially focused design studio founded in 2016 and is dedicated to using design as an agent of change to uplift and transform marginalized communities. You can read that on our website, but I want to talk, let you guys know that Fo Wilson, if you don't know her, is an amazing writer, curator, artist, and designer, mother, teacher. So I could go on, but take a look at her website, take a look at her work. She's a beautiful person inside and out. What I'd like to coin Fo with is she can kiss you on the forehead and punch you in the belly at the same time. We worked on a project called Sounding Bronzeville here in Chicago in the Bronzeville neighborhood. The Bronzeville neighborhood is a key point because during the Great Migration, this is the neighborhood where Blacks would come into, find shelter in, and gather. And so we were offered the opportunity to work with Chicago Park Districts and Burnham Wildlife Corridor, and a great deal of programming geniuses here in the Chicago area, particularly Larissa Johnson, who pretty much did most of the programming, which you'll get to see. But we also teamed up with an amazing group of architects and designers here in Chicago. I will highly recommend, if you don't know Dave Chapman, he is a Willow expert, which before this project, I didn't think there was such a thing. But to think about basketry and really woven material, woven objects, he's been thinking about it in a lot of really beautiful ways. So take a look at his work. But he was a key part of helping us to think about how to gather, how to assemble, how to attach these things and make these structures that would sit on 39th and Lakeshore Drive for people to come and gather. And so we gathered Willow for the beginning of our project, and we were offered space to do it in. And a great deal of community members came out to help us weave. The tallest one is a 10-foot structure. And we literally wanted to have a gathering space that people could stop and rest and chat or attend programming that might be happening there. And so once we built it in the studio, we actually had to put it on a truck and ship it out to the space. So this is Sounding Bronzeville. You can find more of it on Black House Studios website. And this is some of the wonderful programming that happens there. Dorchester Gardens is a project for or through or with Rebuild Foundation here in Chicago and Neighbor Space. And it literally was an engagement of community members to think about how they would like to use a space at 70th and Dorchester called Dorchester Garden, a phenomenal space where tons of food is growing, and they wanted to think about how they could dine within that space. And so we made some proposals and thought with them about how to create a dining space. Neighbor Space worked with the community to pave the area, put up a gate with new composite materials. There was a great deal of effort from the neighborhood. This was with the neighborhood. Some of these people had never used power tools, but insisted on cutting through a lot of the work. And this is just some of the work that came out of the project. John Preuss was our fabricator for the table. We also work with Andreas Lespont here in Chicago to do a lot of the metal work. So it was really an effort that took a number of hands in. This particular project was also local. I'm a pretty local dude. I pride myself on that. This one's called Connect Hyde Park, where Eric Williams, the owner of the Silver Room, wanted to think about a number of vacant spaces around the Hyde Park area and how to highlight those and activate them for engagement. So there was design, there was film, there was fashion and performance. This is a vacant storefront that Fo Wilson and myself curated with a number of really awesome artists throughout the Chicagoland area. This is Sung Jang. There was also performances that happened within the space. So it was real activation of a number of artists, a lot of emerging artists that really don't get that sort of platforms to show off their works. So it was really inspiring to have so many awesome people there. I got to work with, not directly with, but for Solange Knowles and her team, St. Haran. This is another Black House Studios project where we were asked to design a space that would represent St. Haran at the Pitchfork show here in Chicago. And the only thing I heard was Mies van der Rohe House in Plano, the Farnsworth House. But of course, we weren't going to build a Farnsworth House for Pitchfork because I had 2 weeks to do this project. But we did build this space within my studio and then tore it down and delivered it. Again, there's Nick, who's been an instrumental part of the process for quite some years now. And he's all of 28 years old. He started at 19 and he worked for Theaster Gates to start out. And slowly we've had the chance to work together for quite some time now. This is the end of that project. The next one is the Obama Presidential Center, which I was asked to work with Monica Chatta to do this project. And along with Ralph Applebaum and Associates. It was my pride and joy to accept that. And part of the process has been, the research has been really looking at how museums work, how to tell stories throughout those museums, the flow from one floor to the next, and how all of that really ties together to tell a really culturally rich story of Black America.
Oh, Norma, you can't show that picture without saying what it is.
Oh, come on. I would imagine everyone, the people. But this is also within the museum too. That's the mothership.
Indeed.
I would, yeah. And so this has been really rich to work with the team, Ralph Applebaum, but also to be shoulder to shoulder with Amanda Williams and Andreas Hernandez has been also a tremendous pleasure. They're books of knowledge for our city. So we get to work on a lot of community-based projects, one of which that I think we both are really proud of because it started as a one-day event based on a legendary jazz in the alley concerts on the south side of Chicago back in the 70s. And it has grown to continue over the last 3 years. So this happened back in 2018, and we planned it with Hyde Park Jazz Festival. A major component was the community members in the South Shore area at 73rd and Paxton, and Black House Studios, and of course, the Chicago Community Choice and Joyce Foundations were our funders. And I'm gonna close my talk with, a huge thanks once again to the musicians, artists, architects, designers, and performers that came together to be a part of this project. And so I'm gonna also say thank you to Jimmy Ellis, who gave us the foundation for what Back Alley Jazz was all about, how it started, the richness and culture that it brought. And I'm just gonna let that play. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Back Alley Jazz has always been a feeling. Back Alley Jazz was inspired by the historic Back Alley Jazz from the 70s in the South Side of Chicago, and we wanted to revive it for today.
The 4 homes on one block donate their backyard, and that the street will be blocked off, and then we create this festival.
Artists and designers came together in community to produce a one-day event with music, with art, with design, just to have a good time and to be together.
From what I knew of Back Alley Jazz, was where my father used to go and listen to a DJ jam session. My father and people like Jimmy Ellis. Jimmy Ellis is a great saxophonist. Jimmy would get his friends to come, and so it became a scene.
All the people in the community, from the elders to the children, to be together. I didn't have no idea it would take over and get dead.
It grew and grew to a point where the authorities felt the need to shut it down. And then there have just been these efforts to resurrect that spirit.
How do we bring people to the Jazz Fest, this demographic of people that we know live close by, but they don't wind up at the Hyde Park Jazz Fest? Well, let's not try to bring those people here, but can we really find out a way to take this thing to them?
And Norman had some friends that were living on the block. And so we started to engage with those neighbors, and it quite literally organically grew from there.
One of the co-creators, Norman, Teague, called me. And as he explained the idea, I didn't hear more so music, I heard sense of community. So I immediately said, I'm in.
When they were talking about it, part of me was going like, how are they going to put this together? But I didn't think it was going to be that big. So I kind of volunteered.
I didn't know I was involved. So once it got started, I was driven.
She was definitely a driving force.
Yes. That was really reassuring that those that said they were were really in. Where do we have to meet? Who do we have to talk to? Because this thing is happening.
I think you called me the day before and asked, is this really going to happen? And we had 600 people and on our block. The 4 little houses we were responsible for, I took that personally. I heard we had rave reviews. Yeah, I can't keep saying the word phenomenal, but it was. All the people that came up to me, and they were so grateful for us doing it, for allowing them in our spaces. Just seeing all the people coming through, they were pouring into the alleys, trying to still see because the yards have become so crowded. It was magical. I wish we could activate this sort of thing all the time.
But there's also a level of education or introduction to our young people to the importance of this. So I think it's that part's really key as well.
It wasn't until last year at the festival that I saw the historical value. And I didn't see how much the music brought people together. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a big back alley jazz, big event. It can just be neighbors getting together and telling stories. We should encourage people on other blocks to just do the same thing, to get a permit, block it off, get some support from the neighbors and open out your yard. It's that simple.
It's important for the people that's right in this community to see what we're capable of. And people outside of the community, it's a different view. In recent years, South Shore has gained a very terrible reputation.
And I didn't want that to be the only thing you knew us by. Back Alley Jazz is at its core about justice. It's about the right to express culture in your neighborhood and wherever you'd like to, and to ask for the resources to do that. And so we thought the best outcome would be that the community would really own it and take hold of it. They actually did it, I mean, with us, to the point where let's do this again next year. It became something more than just a project. Now it's not just a project. It's got a little bit of all of us in it. And so I really thank them for bringing that to us. Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay.
Fantastic. That was excellent to see that, Norman. Thank you for sharing it.
You're welcome. Thank you, guys. So I think I could end by saying a lot of this work that I do has to have a human value. And I think that design brings a phenomenal return on investment that might not be monetarily, but comes from a completely different place. And if my design skills have the power to do that, then of course, yes, I'd like to train as many more people as I can to do the same. So thank you guys again.
That's great. Thank you. I just see Michelle Washington's asked, do we get to ask questions? The answer is absolutely yes.
Absolutely.
The best way to do is just put the question in the chat box, and then we'll get to you all in order. I see we have a couple already. I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions myself first, Norman, if that's okay.
That's great.
So the first thing I wanted to ask you about is actually on the last point you made, which is about training. And you gave some powerful examples really at two ends of the spectrum, like somebody who had never handled a power tool before, but then dove into it and spent all afternoon cutting lumber. Couldn't stop her. And then on the other end of the spectrum, somebody who might be with you for a decade and really owns the craft and engagement design as a major platform of their own identity. And I guess I just wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about that arc, how you find people and get them involved in what you're doing, the sense of stewardship and responsibility that you have for them while they're with you, and then how you, not push them out of the nest, but what kind of encouragement or direction you give to them as they might go off and start their own enterprises.
Yeah, I think it's a big part for a practice to reveal all parts. That is, the design process covers a lot of different areas. I'll speak to Abire, who was in the video, who just started working with me top of this year. But from the beginning of the Silver Room project, I made it a point that she sat in on meetings with me and the architect and the client. She got to really see like the beginning steps that it takes in the process to get it. So I think that exposing our students, our young people, and our adults to the process is really key. And then they kind of find their lane. You know, like Nick gets into the design and helps us think through sketching and figuring out how things go together best, what's going to look best. So there's a sense of aesthetic that's starting to happen. But Abire is trained. She's been to design school. She just got out, and I can't tell you, like, a big part of why I sacrifice, because I won't hire anyone unless I can pay them, but I sacrifice to have them at least get on a project. And I try and stay very honest with them about this thing could last a long time or it could be very short. I'm going to pay you for the time that you spend on this. And so I just feel like school can give you only so much. I was introduced to sort of the rules of design in design school. Columbia College, Kevin Henry, thank you. they tell you how to use the tools that go with design. They don't tell you how to put your heart in it. They don't tell you that you can use this to open up a storefront. You can use this to make money. You can use this to make a career. Like those things you learn out here in these streets, you got to be working. And so I think that academia can provide so much, but it's up to us to provide the next steps, opening doors that really allows people to feel comfortable. And like a key part, I'm just gonna, you know, I had a moment with these guys. Max is a Black man in design. Ibire is a Black woman in design. Daniel, we were all in one room together and completing this project. And it felt like church. It felt really, really great because we looked at each other and said, this is unusual. 5 Black talented people in one room, working on a very, you know, Silver Room is not a prestigious place. I don't think Eric would ever call it that, but there's a lot of pride that goes into Black folks working together, particularly in the design field. And so I personally try and make that possible. I think a lot of us are working towards that. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Fo. And I think that it's very important for Black young people to see that at a young age, to be a part of that at a young age. I don't know if that answers the question, but I had 2 cups of coffee this morning, so.
Thank you. We have a lot of questions. I was just going to ask you one last one, which is maybe asking you to be a little bit more focused on yourself for 1 second, because you've been talking a lot in a super generous way about the community around you, both individually and collectively. I did want to ask you, maybe specifically in relation to the Obama Library, which is of course super high profile project, but also even in, a little bit, but even in the case of, you know, Back Alley Jazz or the other community projects, how do you think of your own role when you engage in a collaborative process like that? Like, what is your job description to yourself, and how do you think of design as a kind of power that you're bringing into that situation?
Well, that changes from project to project. I will say working on this one was very, there was a lot of thought around Barack and Michelle. You know, I don't know what they like, but I know that comfort is a key part. I know particular things that I like, and they fit into a Black aesthetic. There is a Black aesthetic. And for me, it's, I try and incorporate that into my work. So it really depends on the end user, because no 2 projects are the same. You know, like the things that I'm building for the Silver Room, I'm not, you know, building or designing for the Obama Presidential Center. But I think there is a thought system behind that. And I think it's, you know, for me, I think it's definitely difficult to find a quote unquote, you know, Black piece of architecture or a Black thing, you know. So I try and make sure that it has some either undertones or very blatant tones that aspire to that. So yeah, it's constantly changing though. I'm really inspired by the things around me, the architecture that a lot of architecture was my first field, and it still inspires me, and people. Yeah.
Great, thank you so much. Beautiful. Let's take some questions. Sound good, Norman?
Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's talk to George Cho first. George, do you want to tune in directly and ask your question?
Hi, George.
Hi. No, it's okay. I just wanted to, hello, thank you for your talk. Really inspiring. I don't know if you can hear me, but hello. I just wanted to ask if you think about the notion of the hierarchy of materials when you're making and building and creating. I work with clay, and my love for porcelain has been really affected over the last, few months of me being isolated and all the evolutionary changes that's happening. And I was wondering if you had any of your own sort of principles regarding the hierarchy of materials.
I do, and I don't know if it's in the same capacity that you do, but I as a designer, I really, the selfish side of me is really about playing with new materials and coming up with new things, or like playing in clay is like a dream of mine. I think I would drop furniture if I actually had the kind of access I needed to do clay, but I think about it in a very production type way, like slip casting and repetition. But I also, I think we are looking at in the studio how to bring about the use of new materials. One of the latest ones I've been wanting to play with is hemp. Technically, I really wanted to use marijuana, like real marijuana, to get my point across, because I feel like there's a lot of politics around marijuana right now. And so, I am always trying to dig into new things, but there's also a sense of commerce that I also have to keep an eye on, and equity. And sometimes these materials, plywoods and locally sourced things, are easier to come by and satisfy the type of clientele I'm working with mostly.
Can I just ask Norman, is there also an element of purposefully elevating a material that might be disregarded or its value not seen? Is that something that you think about sometimes?
Can you say that again, Glenn?
Well, just taking a material that might be disregarded or considered to be low status in some way and sort of elevating it. Because I think George is also asking about hierarchy issues and whether that plays into your material selection.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of this recycled element, we've been thinking about how to take on materials that are discarded. We live about 3 blocks away from a recycle center. And we noticed that they don't do a lot with the plastics materials that need to go back into the world. So we're thinking about ways in which we can indulge and maybe partner with them to get some of that to a studio, but also how do you turn that into a workshop that could sort of educate people on what these materials could go back into or have a second life.
Makes me think about your Assemblage Armoire too. It's a really powerful object in the internal.
Design history was a tough time for me, simply because there was no people of color, and I think I know that's ringing throughout the design sort of history groups and organizations. But it's a real thing, and I don't think that it can be discarded. I don't think we can move forward with the textbooks that we're using. I think it really needs to take a deeper look at who we missed, who was missed, and why they were missed. Like that part of history is also a huge part. The tearing out of Black America is a key component into really thinking about how to rebuild America, make America great again. I don't want to get into that shit.
Let's take a question from Michelle Washington. Michelle, you're up if you want to ask directly.
I can't hear you.
You might just have to unmute in your lower left corner.
Hi, Norman. How you doing?
Hi.
I'm so glad to. Hi, Leslie. I'm really glad you're doing this talk and you're giving a really good sensibility about the design in Chicago. Very rich history. So my question is, how can the designers, maker community at large bring more Black, brown joy and not pain to the forefront of this community and or field?
Well, and I don't want to be shallow and use the Silver Room again as an example, but I think the one thing that we can definitely say that we see in marginalized neighborhoods is vacancy. And so how can builders and makers and innovators bring about thought to that? But there also needs to be a level of business people involved with that. But I think that balance between the design world and the business world, which they are not separate, they are together, can bring about a lot of the changes that I think the urban landscapes might need. I don't know if that answers it, but I think that with us thinking together and working together, when we're building bars, because that's one of the big things that people are pushing for to have in the neighborhood. I think that somebody's got to build that. Somebody's got to design that. Somebody's got to think that through before you actually get to the tangible thing. And so I think that Black voices and Black thought need to be at the forefront of that, particularly when it's happening in Black neighborhoods.
That maybe links really well to the question that Seth Keller was going to ask. Seth, are you out there? Do you want to ask directly? Maybe it's just a short question. I think it carries on from that point really well, Norman. So he just asked, can you talk more about authorship and your collaborations? So how that agency is shared out, I guess, between the different people that are involved.
Yeah, if I find it, at least for me, and I don't know about other people, but I don't do too good at taking ownership. My practice is really about sharing. It's about sharing ideas. It's about sharing skill sets. It's really, there's a great deal of what I'm doing is sharing. And the hardest part about doing a PowerPoint presentation is like, did I forget anyone? Because I try to thank everyone. Authorship and making, I feel, again, I think that's slightly a shared moment as well. If I'm sketching and someone else is building based off of my sketches, I don't know legalities and around all that, but I think there's also a shared moment in making, and I think that there's a relationship that's developed on the front end of that to make up for that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know a lot of designers that actually build their work, and then I do know a lot of makers that make and show their work. I feel like the conversations are had in the beginning, therefore the understanding on the back end is clear.
Mm. Can I, maybe this is a little bit provocative, but I'm wondering whether there might be a distinction there between design as a working process and fine art as a different kind of working process. And I'm thinking particularly here of Theaster Gates's activities in Chicago, which you've been directly involved with.
Yeah.
And I get the feeling that there have been some questions raised about agency and authorship in that context, not to get into that too much, but yeah, to think about whether design has a kind of unique or special relationship to those questions, where it's a bit easier to see it as a joint practice because historically design has often functioned in that way. Is that something you would want to argue?
I don't know if I can speak to it much. I feel like my studio practice, yeah, I don't know if I can speak to it that much or in depth anyway. So maybe we should just go to another question. So I don't know.
We'll think about that some more. Let's go to Malcolm Mabuto Smith's question. He's coming from Indiana University and wants to talk about potential future collaboration. Hey there, Malcolm. Great to see you.
Hello. Hello. Thank you, sir.
Hi, Malcolm.
Fine presentation. I've long wrestled with and have been teaching in academia for 25 years, and there's a dearth of young people of color in school, despite my presence in higher education. It has not been a beacon, and I would love to figure out some ways that I can partner with provocative, interesting, and potent, smart African-American men and women to advance the numbers and populations in larger universities and art academies. And I'm wondering if you could riff on, one, why you think that the African-American community is so small a population within the fine arts or design curriculum, and what we might do to change that.
I think it's, thank you so much, Malcolm. I am yours. Like I'll drop you my email after this. I feel like there aren't more in the field or in academia looking at it as a career choice, because it's not as accessible as a football game or a basketball game or, again, a liquor store. We need to bring it closer, and we need to call it out as that. I think at the corner store next to the bakery, there needs to be a design studio. There needs to be an architect whose door is open on Saturdays for conversations to happen. I think there needs to be a slew of internships and apprentices, again, within our neighborhoods, so that people can have access to this. There's also Chicago park districts in every neighborhood. There needs to be some sort of a skill set offered at every one of those, be it ceramics, be it woodworking, knitting, whatever it might be. I think that we lose out on the possibilities of using our hands to make a living because we don't get the exposure. We don't get to think about being a researcher until a later moment in life. And I think a lot of times that seems too late for young people of color. Mm. And so I just feel like it needs to be as close as, a policeman. Like we see police all over the place, and that becomes a dream. Like, how do we replace that? Or how do we, really start to mix that in with everything? We used to have suit makers. Where can you find a tailor nowadays and get a suit made? And so I just feel like those things that really ask us to use creativity and skill sets at a community level have become things that either don't make enough money or they're not popular. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, that's a very powerful answer. Thank you. I think that helps also answer a question from Brent Budsberg, our friend up in Milwaukee, who was asking a similar question about internships. But I feel like maybe just in the interest of time, we'll go to one last question, which is from Paul Sacharides. And it's a question about Chicago itself. Paul, can you join us?
Yeah, can you hear me? I have
we can. Good, Paul.
Okay. Hey, how are you? Hey, Norm, it's great to see you.
Hi, Paul. I can't see you.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't play very nice host there. There we go.
Hey, there you go.
Hey, so that was great, all of it. I'm curious, having lived in Chicago for a bit and then also just watching things and knowing so many folks there, what do you think, like, what's the situation in Chicago that has allowed for a certain kind of socially engaged practices in art and design to develop so fruitfully there? It seems like there are these exciting projects that happen in Chicago that it's like, it seems like it's very much happening there and it doesn't happen elsewhere in quite the same way. And I'm curious, like, what do you think the conditions are in Chicago that allow that to happen? Or do you think that is something that actually happens? Or I mean, I think observation?
Paul, thank you. That's a really great question. And I don't think, and you can, maybe somebody from somewhere else can tell me if it's not quite the same in Harlem, if it's not quite the same in Philly, in a Black neighborhood, because I think personally, there's a Black excellence that's a very organic thing and it's more done than said, but it feels to me like Black joy. And I don't know, I don't know if like spiritually I'll have to go into a conversation around that, but I feel like the same thing that moves you from the listening to a tambourine, the same thing, the same movement from listening to drums play, Parliament Funkadelic. I mean, this Black thing is a lot of it is called, I think it's unity. I think it's a Black essence, and it comes from a very, like, back alley jazz, an organic movement happened in the alley, in neighborhoods that were marginalized, but dependent strongly on one another. And I think that socially, Chicago has that, and it always has. It's the home of jazz, it's the home of blues. It's kind of a built-in thing. I don't think it's all Black, but it's definitely from a Black place. Paul, I don't know how to explain it any better, and I'm sorry for that, but I feel like it's this, yeah, it's an inner thing.
That's such a wonderful way to finish, if we want to finish. But Norman, do you want to add any? Because I feel like we're just getting started in so many ways. But is there anything else you want to share with the audience before we draw it to a close? No,
just a really big thank you. And I think the essence of design for me, and I applaud it for everyone else that really puts a focus on it. So design must touch humans. It must touch humans. Good design must touch humans. That's my manifesto. Thank you, guys.
Unimprovable. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Quick advance notice of our guest on Monday. We're going to be speaking with Gus